Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. The Democratic candidates are regrouping after Tuesday's primary in New Hampshire. Some are already in Nevada and South Carolina, where the next two nominating contests are. Some have abandoned their campaigns altogether. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders narrowly beat former Mayor Pete Buttigieg in the Granite State. Senator Amy Klobuchar finished third, followed by Senator Elizabeth Warren and former Vice President Joe Biden. After the results, three candidates dropped out: Andrew Yang, Michael Bennet, and Deval Patrick. CBS News estimates that Sanders and Buttigieg will both win 9 delegates in the state, while Warren and Biden will not win any. Buttigieg still has the most delegates overall after narrowly winning the Iowa caucus last week. But Sanders is close behind, and he is now the only non-president to pull off 2 consecutive primary wins in New Hampshire. Our CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe spoke with him and asked him how he was able to pull it off.
We put together an extraordinary coalition. We won very well among working people, lower-income people, young people, and I think people who are tired of status quo politics when the people on top have so much wealth and so much power when so many other people are struggling.
The primary has also been grabbing President Trump's attention. Here's what he said Wednesday inside the Oval Office.
I would say Bernie looks like he's doing very well.
Why is he surging?
I think people like his message. He's got energy. His people have energy, but they like his message. But a lot of people don't like that particular message. But there is a group that probably agrees with it, and whoever it is will take them on. But it would certainly seem that Bernie Sanders has the advantage right now.
I want to bring in Anthony Salvanto, Eugene Scott, and Zach Montellaro. Anthony is our CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys. Eugene is a politics reporter for The Washington Post. And Zach is a campaign reporter for Politico. Welcome to all of you. Anthony, let me start with you. First of all, nice to see you in person. I really want to find out here, when you look at the actual figures that were coming in, how is it that Bernie Sanders was able to pull this off?
Well, watching you guys up there in New Hampshire and watching this together is that you saw a lot of his core support turn out for him, and that meant younger voters. That meant people who consider themselves very liberal. One of the things, though, that we have to note is that his percentage of the vote had been steady, mostly steady in the pre-election polls, steady in the final results. And now I think the question going forward is, do things grow from there for him? He hasn't lost much. He hasn't gained much. Can he draw from the rest of the Democratic electorate as we go forward? I think that's a key question. And I'm also really glad that you put up those delegate numbers in your intro, because you're correct that we estimate that he and Buttigieg will split the delegates. You also see that there haven't been that many delegates awarded yet. And I think the lesson out of that and out of last night is this is about what it is that voters in upcoming states see and gauge from the results that people go up on the podium and they declare themselves winners and they all of that. And that is technically what momentum is. It's voters in the next state looking at that candidate and going, okay, maybe those folks see something or know something about them that I don't know yet, and maybe I'll reassess. Because otherwise, it's just about even in delegates.
Right. But so what about Pete Buttigieg? What groups came out for him?
Well, one thing that struck me was he, along with Amy Klobuchar, did well with late deciders. And there was an extraordinary number of late deciders, 50%, who said that they made up their mind. It really was twice as many as in 2016.
Wow, it's remarkable.
So, we often said, did the debates move the needle throughout this process? Well, Friday nights certainly did. And
it was surprising on a Friday night.
Yeah, on a Friday night.
People were watching.
Yep. And so, but look, but that speaks to, Elaine, I think, the fact that this race is still very much unsettled. So if that's going to be a point of information or a point at which you can gauge candidates, then voters are obviously tuning in. And so to your question about what happened to Pete Buttigieg, he got some of those late deciders, so did Amy Klobuchar, but it also, in a larger sense, seems like they are both picking up what used to be Joe Biden's support. And as people seem like they're feeling, wait a second, maybe Joe Biden cannot win, some of what was his former support is going to the two of them. And that's where that divide is starting to emerge.
I want to talk more about Joe Biden in just a moment. But, Zach, let me turn to you. What does winning New Hampshire mean for Bernie Sanders and his campaign?
Well, winning New Hampshire for Bernie Sanders means that he can at least declare a victory right now. You know, Iowa still remains muddied. We don't have a winner there yet. We're more than a week past it, and there's no officially declared winner. But Sanders gets that first mark on the board. You know, certainly it's not anywhere approaching his 2016 margin when there was only 2 real candidates running. But a win is a win is a win. Sanders' campaign will try to drive this message forward. And coming up next is Nevada, a state that, you know, we haven't seen public polling there in a long time. Anthony, maybe you can help us out. But, you know, a state
he will,
that
I'm sure.
I hope. And, you know, Nevada's a state that Sanders wants to do strong in too, and winning the state previously to the state you want to do strong in certainly helps you.
Eugene, let me ask you about Pete Buttigieg coming in at this close second last night. Our Ed O'Keefe spoke with him about his campaign in New Hampshire. Let's listen to some of that.
Well, we did this by reaching out everywhere. We took no vote for granted and left no vote on the table. And what we found is that there is tremendous appetite for a message that can deliver bold changes and offer to do it in a way that's unifying. This is not, I think, a moment to further divide the American people. This is a moment to rally the American people around the changes that we need, not just a change in president, but a change in approach in Washington.
So, Eugene, what's your sense here? How does Buttigieg's placing in Iowa and New Hampshire actually affect his trajectory here in the next early states? Because, as has been pointed out, they're quite different than Iowa and New Hampshire, much more diverse.
Absolutely. We know that Nevada has a significant Latino population, and South Carolina has a large group of black voters who will be very influential in helping choose the Democratic nominee. But what Buttigieg is going to do is likely what he did in Iowa and New Hampshire, and that is go to the counties that are more conservative, that perhaps were counties that went for Obama in 08 and 12, but flipped for Trump, and try to convince these Americans that they can actually vote left this go around. That has been effective for him so far. Few candidates do more events than Buttigieg in any given day, and so he's actually making inroads with people who usually do not have any kind of interaction with candidates because they may live in a less populated area or a part of the state that just doesn't really attract people often. Buttigieg also has one advantage that a lot of his competitors don't have. Buttigieg doesn't have a day job. So he's able to just actually have 7 and sometimes 9 events in any given day, 5 or 6 TV hits, and it's actually working out for him.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Anthony, let's go back and talk about Joe Biden. You know, it was interesting to sit there in New Hampshire and then get the email saying that the former vice president was not even going to be there in New Hampshire when the results came in that he was heading to South Carolina. Remind us, Eugene touched on it, but remind us why South Carolina is such a focus for the former vice president.
Well, throughout this campaign, he has had support from African-American voters who will probably constitute a majority and then some of the electorate, the Democratic Party electorate there in South Carolina. So since he didn't do well in New Hampshire, and look, had we had this conversation in September or October thinking, wait, Joe Biden won't get delegates in New Hampshire.
He was doing so well in South Carolina at that time, right? Among African-American voters.
And so heading into that, he's going back and looking to see if that base of support can bolster him, right? And see if he will at least do well, maybe win in South Carolina based on that. I think the open question, however, is what effect will the results out of Iowa and out of New Hampshire have even on his core base of support? Maybe a lot, maybe nothing. But that's one of the things that is the open question here.
Yeah, Eugene, let me ask you about that. I mean, as Joe Biden enters South Carolina here in the final stretch before that primary, what is it that he comes into that state with in terms of perception? Because they obviously had been counting on South Carolina, as Anthony just pointed out, and as you touched on a moment ago. But how damaged is the former vice president politically, given what we saw in Iowa and New Hampshire?
You know, I don't know if he's damaged with black voters because of Iowa and New Hampshire. The reality is he's still in the lead with black voters, but only about 10 points over Sanders, according to the most recent Quinnipiac poll. What he actually is more concerned about probably are these advertisements coming from Mike Bloomberg. Bloomberg is at 22%. with black voters, nearly 1 in 4 right now, in a race that Biden previously, 2 or 3 months ago, had such a clear advantage in, that this was not a concern of his. And so some of these voters are very attracted to the ads that Bloomberg has put forward, featuring people like Barack Obama and other high-profile black Americans, convincing them that he actually would be the best option for them. But also the way that New Hampshire and Iowa could factor into this is that if black voters don't see Biden being successful in New Hampshire and Iowa, and they quite frankly have not, they might look for another moderate option that they think could take on Trump, and that would explain some of the success that Bloomberg is having.
Meantime, Zach, Senator Elizabeth Warren is canceling ad buys in South Carolina and Nevada. What is the reality of her campaign right now?
Well, listen, it is never good when you're canceling ad buys. That means that at some level, there's some level of a cash crunch instead of just expanding. Her campaign says, no, we're rebooking. They booked some other time in Nevada. They're just kind of shuffling around. And they booked some time in Maine, interestingly enough. But Warren's campaign maintains that they're in this for the long haul. They sent out a memo yesterday, before any results were tallied, mind you, saying, listen, just a couple of states have voted so far, and Super Tuesday is right around the corner. They argued that they would be the third most viable candidate in a bunch of congressional districts on Super Tuesday. And that's what really matters at the end of the day, is how many delegates can you win? It's not, what the score is, not what the popular vote is in all these states, is how many delegates can you come away with? And Super Tuesday is going to be that first real big test. I think right now we've had about 2% of delegates awarded. By the time Super Tuesday rolls around March 3rd, it'll be about 40%. So that'll be the first test, is can these campaigns hold on? Can Senator Warren hold on till Super Tuesday? And then what can she do it on that day?
Let me ask you about Senator Amy Klobuchar. She says following last night, she's looking ahead to South Carolina and Nevada. Here's what she said when addressing supporters last night. Let's listen.
The people of New Hampshire, because of you, we are taking this campaign to Nevada. We are going to South Carolina. And we are taking this message of unity to the country.
So, Zach, what has her ground game been like in those states so far, and how is it changing now?
Well, it's been small so far. She's been a campaign that was kind of holding on and trying to make a strong showing in Iowa and New Hampshire and then see what happens next. There's been a lot of strong third-place finishers. Ask Marco Rubio, ask John Huntsman what a good, strong third-place finish gets you in Iowa and New Hampshire and what it gets you further on. And also, Senator Klobuchar struggled with non-white voters. In the recent polling that's come out, I think same Quinnipiac poll that was mentioned earlier, Klobuchar was at a 0 among black voters. Granted, that's on a national scale. That's not just looking at the African-American population in South Carolina. But that's her real struggle right now, is she raised a lot of money over the past few days. Can she spend it effectively? Can she, chip into people's support? And can she hire some staff on the ground now, with just a couple of weeks to go in Nevada and South Carolina?
Right. A lot of challenges here, not a lot of time to get all that done. Anthony, let's talk about delegates, since you're our numbers person here. How many delegates do we see coming out of Nevada and South Carolina compared to Iowa and New Hampshire?
It's still not a lot. These are still momentum plays. You'll see 36 out of Nevada and 54 out of South Carolina. To put that in context, you need 1,991 to get the nomination. So it's still about being perceived as a winner. But for the Democrats, it's also a chance, I think, to go to a different constituency, to go, and we talked about African-American voters in Nevada, to go to perhaps Hispanic voters as well, and then make the argument that you have appeal to these different parts, at least demographically, of the Democratic constituency. But having said that, I think that one of the things we have to watch in these primaries going forward is this split, not on demographics, but on direction of the party, which is really emerging, which is to say the roughly half who say that the party's message should be return to the Obama administration policies. And the other half say they want somebody more progressive, more liberal than the party has ever had. And I think as long as that argument is going on, then the candidate race remains unsettled.
Yeah. Eugene, let's talk about former Mayor Michael Bloomberg. So Super Tuesday is 3 days after South Carolina's primary, and that, of course, is the day that Bloomberg is banking on. What does his path look like at this point in time?
Well, right now there are two approaches that he is clearly taking. One is former Trump supporters who are, disenchanted with the president and hope someone maybe left of him, but not to the far left, will be victorious in defeating him. And they're looking at Bloomberg as one of those options. And secondly, what we do know is that Bloomberg is targeting black voters, knowing that that's one of the core demographics of the Democratic Party. And it's gotten him quite a bit of pushback considering his past stances on stop and frisk as mayor of New York, leading him to come out and apologize for supporting the policy as recently as last year. But what he's doing is spending millions of dollars sowing seeds into people who previously had doubts about Trump and reinforcing them, letting them know that he would be a better option for them if they still remain undecided and we're looking at a moderate option.
Certainly seems to be an X factor in everybody's political equations right now. All right, Anthony Salvanto, Eugene Scott, and Zach Montellaro, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.